What is up, everybody? Welcome in Purple and Gold Podcast, Thursday, March 12th. Couple of things on the docket today. One of the things I wanted to talk about was LSU baseball's roster construction and some of the guys that transferred out last year versus some of the guys that transferred in. And then I wanted to weigh in a little bit on Gary Reedus off LSU's women's basketball staff taking the Rutgers job, and also weigh in a little bit more on the Will Wade rumors and the Matt McMahon situation. So I went and looked at a couple of guys who transferred away from LSU's baseball program last year. One was Ryan Costello. He was a freshman first baseman last year, did not really get to play, obviously, with Jared Jones on the roster. He is at Maryland right now. He is hitting over 300. He has 9 home runs. I also went and checked on Mikey Ryan. Mikey Ryan was a shortstop from my alma mater, Archbishop Rummel. Again, didn't play much last year. Obviously, Stephen Milam was back at shortstop, but you would have thought that maybe Mikey Ryan could have competed, maybe at second base, maybe at third base. He's hitting over 300, started every game for North Carolina State. He's got 5 home runs. And then there was Ashton Larson, who was obviously on the team for 2 years, was a spot player at times in his freshman year, played more than he did in his sophomore year last year. Obviously, LSU's outfield was stacked. He's at Texas. He's played in 13 games. He's started 11. He's batting right around 300. I went and looked at these guys because, none of us are privy to what happens at the end of a season and why certain guys might transfer, right? Did Jay Johnson ask certain guys to transfer because they weren't developing at the rate that LSU required? Did guys transfer because maybe the program was too much for them? Maybe they didn't like their position on the depth chart? Did guys make a rash decision and transfer out without thinking it through? And so none of this is meant to disparage Jay Johnson and Nate Yeske and Mark Wanaka and this coaching staff and the roster that they built. I think Jay's proven over his 4+ years here that he knows what he is doing. And it's not to disparage the kids who came in that I'm going to compare them to. I am questioning this not to shine a light on Ryan Costello versus Zach York, or Mikey Ryan versus Trent Caraway. Not what I'm necessarily here to do. The reason for me bringing this up and the reason for asking the question is, would it have helped if there was a little more continuity coming off a national championship? What happens when you win the national championship is you generally had a very talented, very good team, and you probably lose a lot of players off of that team to the draft. That is what happened in 2023 and why LSU took a step back in 2024. They had to replace their weekend rotation. They had to replace Dylan Cruz. They had to replace Trey Morgan. They had to replace Braden Jobert. And it was too much for one recruiting class and one transfer portal class to do. And then, of course, there were guys in that class like Mac Bingham and others who they went in the portal and got who just didn't deliver on what you thought you were getting. Same thing here. You lose Cade Anderson. You lose Anthony Ianson. You lose Chase Shores. You lose Josh Pearson. You lose Jared Jones. You lose Daniel Dickinson. You lose Luis Hernandez. You lose Michael Braswell. The natural thought would be, instead of going to get, and again, not knocking this, but instead of going to get Daniel Harden, why wouldn't you keep Ashton Larson? Instead of going to get Zach York, why wouldn't you keep Ryan Costello? Now, obviously, Ryan Costello had no track record in college baseball. This is his first breakout. And at a place like LSU, maybe you can't count on that. So maybe you say, we're bringing in Zach York, we're bringing in Braden Simpson, and a guy like Ryan Costello transfers out. And that's probably what happened. But there's got to be some element of being able to predict that and see that, because both Mikey Ryan and Ryan Costello are playing Power 4 baseball right now. And statistically, they are doing better than the people you brought in to replace them. Now, in the case of Ashton Larson, I really believe it was because you had Stanfield, you had Curiel, you had Jake Brown coming back. He was in a crowded outfield these last 2 years. He didn't want to be in a crowded outfield again here at LSU. But yet he went to Texas and he's sort of in a crowd. So I don't know if he was sort of not really asked to stay and maybe was let go. Not really sure how that all played out. All of this is just an exercise to say that no one bats 1,000, and I don't think any book on any of these players that LSU got out of the transfer portal has certainly been written yet. And I do think guys like Trent Carraway and Seth Dardar and Braden Simpson and Zach York can still be part of a great, successful, winning LSU team. It's just something interesting to keep an eye on in this day and age of so much roster turnover. What happens to the guys who maybe don't stick it out even for a second year? So shifting gears, I did want to mention, Gary Reedus, who was LSU's women's basketball assistant coach and lead recruiter. He did take the head coaching job at Rutgers. He will not be with LSU's women's basketball program for the NCAA tournament. Kim Mulkey revealed that on Baton Rouge radio, I believe yesterday. She said you can't be married to two wives, and she encouraged him to go get started there. So Kim will have to hire a new assistant coach who will double in that lead recruiting role. Kim said she will field more phone calls and be more of a vital part of the recruiting in the next few weeks going forward. And obviously, in the next few weeks, LSU's focus will be on the NCAA tournament. So we wish Gary Reedus all the best. And it looks like he may also be taking another assistant, Daphne Mitchell, with him to Rutgers. So Kim will have a few new members of her staff next year. I also just wanted to give an update on some of the Will Wade, Matt McMahon stuff. A lot of people have written articles and put things in perspective about Matt McMahon's winning percentage at LSU. His conference winning percentage is worse than Johnny Jones. It's worse than Trent Johnson in basketball. It's worse than Curly Holman in football. Obviously, we know the situation with Matt McMahon. NC State did lose today in the ACC tournament, but if you look at anyone's bracketology, they're solidly in the NCAA tournament. I do not expect anything to be revealed in regards to Matt McMahon before anything would happen with NC State in the NCAA basketball tournament. The NCAA basketball tournament outside of the first four begins in earnest next Thursday and Friday. If you want Will Wade back in the saddle, root against NC State. Root for them to have an early exit and root for Will Wade to possibly be available as soon as next week. Whether or not the appetite is there to round up the $11 million it would take to fire Matt McMahon remains to be seen. I will tell you that this is going on all over the country. So South Carolina, who's been pretty much equally as bad as LSU in men's basketball the last 2 years, they announced they are bringing back their coach, Lamont Paris. Now, Lamont Paris had a good season a few years back, and they gave him an extension, and so his buyout was somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 or $12 million. But I can tell you, and people who cover South Carolina have already stated this, Shane Beamer missed the bowl game last year. He's on thin ice if South Carolina football doesn't have a good year. And the Paul Mainieri hire has been an abject failure. they're going to be a very bad team in the SEC this year. They may have to pull the plug on Coach Maneri after just 2 years. So I think South Carolina looked at this and said, we know we're going to have to spend over here. We can't afford to spend here. And that's sort of what's happening to LSU. LSU still paying Brian Kelly, still paying Matt House. They had to pay Ed Orgeron. They had to pay, $91 million for Lane Kiffin, $40 million for a football roster. So this is all just money, and it's all about where you're going to allocate your money. I do know that Jeff Landry is a shrewd governor. He's a shrewd lobbyist. And if him and Lee Mallett and the people involved who really want Will Wade can put their mind to it, I think they can find the donors to pay this money and get Will Wade. So we will see what happens with North Carolina State and whenever their exit is from the NCAA basketball tournament. We'll be back tomorrow with a full preview of LSU and Vanderbilt. As always, please like and subscribe and share. It helps the channel grow. If you're on Instagram and Facebook, please comment. And you can follow me on Twitter at RobG1124. As always, be good to one another. And always, 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 go Tigers.